Good evening to everyone. In Lok Satta today it has been announced that the lecture will be in Marathi. Probably they have observed that the speaker is Maharashtrian, Marathi speaking. But then the subject, language, terminology is such that it is difficult to express in Marathi, so the lecture will be in English. This is the 23rd lecture in the series on nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is becoming more and more useful in variety of disciplines of science, and so the attraction of the people in general in the science researchers community also, it has become very attractive. To know more about that, we have decided to have a lecture of Dr. Mandar Deshmukh from TIFR, Mumbai. Mr. Mandar Deshmukh has done his BA, BTech engineering in physics from IIT Powai. Then he proceeded to Cornell University and he did his PhD there. Then from 2006 onwards, he is in TIFR. His research area is condensed matter physics and material science. Mandar Deshmukh has bagged Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award, then TWAS Affiliate Award, Swarna Jayanti Fellowship, IBM Faculty Award, B.M. Birla Physics Prize. He has been guiding to many students for their PhD. Instead of introducing him for more time, it is better that I request him to deliver a speech. Before that, Mr. Sharad Kale will welcome him by giving the book. Incidentally, in one of the government programs, I learned that the education minister has said, instead of bouquet, now we give book. We have been following that since long. Thank you, Mr. Mandar.
So it's really a great pleasure for me to come and talk to you, and I hope to convey one, the excitement about nanoscience and nanotechnology. So I am a professor whose main interest is in my main interest is in looking at scientific aspects, although we also look at technology, what are the implications. The other thing that I want to convey by the end of this lecture is what's going on around the world, what are the potential, and then I also will be happy to answer questions. And the technical part, because the language and terminology, as was said, I'll speak in English, but if there are questions, I'll be happy to try to speak in Marathi as much as possible if there are specific questions. I work at TIFR for the last 12 years, and it's a very short distance from here. I want to acknowledge the support that we get from the government, which gets benefit from the taxpayers. Many of you are here, and I'm grateful. So this research is possible from support from Department of Atomic Energy and Department of Science and Technology of India, which is supported by all of you who are present here. So I want to make an effort to communicate the science to everybody as much as possible. Okay, so who are the people who do the work? So before I get into my scientific part of my talk, So I work with a lot of young people, and I want to make sure that I thank them for all their hard work. I get the opportunity to come and talk about our work, but I am grateful to the students who do the work. These are all the students who work with me. Most of them work towards their PhD. Some of them also spend a year or 6 months working on their thesis. They are from other institutions all over India. And there are scientific staff who are permanent staff members of TIFR. Digambar and Santosh, they provide valuable support for making some of this research possible. Okay, So, okay. So before we get into what I do or what's exciting about nanoscience and nanotechnology, I wanted to show you this chart. Okay, on the left side are basically things from the natural world. Okay, we did not have any role to play in their development. Our world around us or our bodies already have, in some sense, some very complex nanotechnology or nanoscience at work. On this side, I'll explain a little bit. On this side is the world that humans are trying to, in some sense, make things which are at nanometer scale. Okay, so does anybody here know where the term nanotechnology or nanoscience come from? Is that sort of Feynman? Okay, so nanoscience was certainly Feynman sort of made some important ideological contributions. So the word nano is a word that comes from Greek, okay, and it just means small, okay, and in the system of units that we have, just like we have kilometer, we have meter, we have centimeter, nanometer is a unit of length, okay? And so this is a ruler in some sense where things of different lengths are mentioned. So as we go from here, ants, for example, in the natural world, they are millimeters, say 4 or 5 millimeter. And as we go down, things will become smaller and smaller. So nano, its definition says that nanometer is basically 10 to the power minus 9. So if you want to write down in decimal, it's 0.000001 meter. So it's very small unit of meter. But one way to think about nanometer is if you take roughly, any atom, and if you put about, roughly of the order of 10 atoms or 5 atoms side by side like eggs, it will give you roughly about 1 nanometer, okay? So when we talk about nanoscience or nanotechnology, we are talking about things which happen when things are made very small. Okay, so if things are made very small, we're talking about something like 10 atoms or 100 atoms. That there's no hard definition for what is nanoscience or nanotechnology. It's a kind of a fuzzy definition, but roughly we are talking about things which are close to the atomic scale. Okay, so one other way to kind of think about it is typical human hair. So just to I want to make you sort of familiar with how small things are. Is if you think of a typical human hair, its diameter is 100 micrometers, which is about 0.1 millimeter. So the smallest unit on any ruler that you buy in a stationery store is about a millimeter. So 0.1 millimeter is 1/10 of that smallest scale. And nanometer is many, many times smaller than the diameter of a hair. So if you take a diameter of a hair and you divide it into 1 lakh part, the smallest part is in the nanometer. So you take the width of the hair and you kind of chop it finely. And the smallest part, part is 1 nanometer. So we are talking about things which are small. So I gave you example how to think about nanometer both from atoms and also from the top because everybody is familiar with small things. So the first thing is that you cannot see these things easily with your bare eye. So you need some special tools to see them. And science and technology over the last several decades has developed these tools to not only see them but to manipulate and to study them. And I'm going to give you some examples before I get into it. Okay, so let me give you an idea about the natural world first because it's already there. Many years of evolution, the living world around us already has these things. And they're very complex. Some we don't understand even today, and we're making efforts to understand them. So ants are roughly about 5 millimeters. These are dust mites, very small, kind of creatures which are roughly about 2 to 3 times the diameter of human hair. Human hair is roughly about 100 micrometers. Ash, which is basically rock, is about 10 micrometers in diameter, which is 1/10 of a human hair. And as you go down, red blood cells. So all we live, all the living beings, but certainly humans, red blood cells carry a very important role. These are the small cells that flow in your blood, and they carry the oxygen to different parts of the body. So red blood cells are about 10 microns roughly. Okay, so human hair, you divide it into 10 parts, width, and then the smallest part is the diameter of a red blood cell. Okay, so that's we are going smaller and smaller. Then as you go smaller, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It's a small, in some sense, a machine that is inside all living beings. It essentially converts through complex chemical reactions. It basically allows us to use the energy that we are getting through the different food and nutrition that we get. So that is about 10 nanometers. So we are becoming very, very small. So 10 nanometer is, so our body or living beings already have in some sense very complex machines which are already kind of marvels of nanotechnology, but we had no role in making them. Our bodies already possess these for many, many, millions of years of evolution already has these machines. And the amazing thing is that we, as of today, don't completely understand how they work. We are still making efforts to understand them. One step smaller than that is a DNA. So people often hear this word in kind of public discourse. DNA is a fundamental block in which information is kind of stored in our, so the genes, the genetic information that we have is stored through the DNA, and that essentially in some sense makes us the sort of individuals that we are in terms of the genetic information. That is very, very small. We are talking about a few nanometer, okay? So it's not a very large structure, and it's very complex. It plays an important role in not just our daily functioning, but if something bad happens to the DNA, then they will mutate or change, and then they also lead to disorders in our body, mutation in these DNA, the code that is written inside that DNA. It's kind of, you can think of, if some of you are kind of computer enthusiasts or programmers, the DNA is essentially a platform on which the body has written very complex codes for very complex chemical reactions. And if something bad happens due to some mutation, then that code goes bad, and then bad things can happen. For example, one of the things is if there's mutation which is uncontrolled, it results in some kinds of cancer. Okay, so, and the smallest, of course, is the atoms that you have, which are, about roughly about 0.1 nanometer. And all atoms are of different size. I'm just giving you a rough idea. So if you take silicon atoms, they're roughly about 0.1 nanometer, okay? Which is about, that itself is a unit of length, but I'm not going to talk about it now because I'll introduce another terminology. So nanometer is a very small thing. We are approaching the atomic scale. That's sort of what I want to convey. Now, often people ask me, what is nanoscience? Is there a hard definition that, okay, nanoscience and nanotechnology involves things made of only 100 nanometers? It's not really like that. It's sort of like a rough region in which you say, okay, if things are 10 nanometers or 100 nanometers, you will see exciting things, which are behavior which is fundamentally different from what we experience in our everyday life, okay? So now let's go to the other side, which is the man-made things. And over the last, I would say, 30, 40 years, there has been very rapid progress in humans trying to make things at nanometer scale, essentially explore nanoscience and develop nanotechnology. So the tip of a typical pin is about, that pin that you use to kind of attach two papers together is about a millimeter or so. And if you go further small, people have made essentially machines, gears, using silicon, which are called micro electromechanical systems. I'll give you some version of that later in my talk. These are about roughly 100 micrometers. So the gears are much smaller than the diameter of human hair. Okay. As we go smaller and smaller, things become wider. So these are tubes of graphite. Okay. I will talk a little bit about the research about what we do. Imagine you have graphite. So where does graphite come from? If you take a pencil, the lead that you use to write with is basically made of graphite. Okay, it's layers of carbon, and you can peel off one layer. I will tell you about how we do it. This is an experiment that we do in our lab. If you roll it up into a cylinder, which scientists discovered in roughly 1990s, you can form tubes which are diameter of about few nanometers. Okay, so these are very small tubes. Of course, you cannot see them with your eye, but you know that you have tools to actually be able to see them and manipulate them. And you can make small transistors out of them. So transistors sorry, are the smallest unit of any computing architecture that we have. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it. At a fundamental level, there was a very pioneering experiment which was done in IBM in about 1990s. And that is truly my favorite sort of experiment, because what they demonstrated was an ability to arrange atoms by design. So they made a very sharp, you can think of it as a very small needle, and they picked one atom at a time and they arranged them in regular shapes by design. So each dot that you see here is one atom. And this is called a microscope, now very common. There are many of these that we use at TIFR. These are called scanning tunneling microscope. You can literally lift one atom by design and arrange them in patterns that you want. So this is truly the fundamental limit of, I would say, nanoscience and nanotechnology, that you're assembling atoms just like you would assemble some building blocks. And the properties of things around us are based on the arrangement of atoms. Okay, how the atoms are arranged, which atoms are arranged in which position, determine what properties the system will have. It affects its electronic property and all the other properties that we know. Okay, so that's sort of the big picture of the nanoscience. My work is on this side, which is human-made. There are researchers who work in sort of using biology and trying to study essentially problems of nanoscience at this length scale. Just to give you an example, there are very complex machines inside our body which are called molecular motors, which will move inside a cell, the smallest part of the cell. They will carry material from the outside boundary of the cell to the inside of the cell, which is called a nuclei. And they take very, very tiny steps. They exactly know which direction to go to. And so it's, when I read about it, it's very remarkable that our living world has over many, many, many years evolved into some very complex structures that are on this side. We are not even close to getting to that level of complexity. We are trying very hard, but we are at a very, at least in some cases, we are at a very basic level, but in some other cases, we are making rapid progress. So I'll try to explain to that a little bit later. So before I go, so in the next part, I'm going to tell you a little bit about, try to convey the excitement about what sort of things we do, how is it different, and it will have connection to technology aspect a little bit. But at this point, are there any questions that something that I said is not clear? Because this is sort of the basic foundation on which I will go a bit further. If there are questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, so not yet. Okay, all right. So that seems like a good thing. But please feel free to interrupt. My job is not to kind of show a lot of slides and give you a lot of terminology. My goal is to make sure that you understand the essence of it. So I will specifically try to omit jargon, which is technical terms which can be overwhelming, but you can feel free to interrupt me at any point of time. Okay? All right, so let's go a little bit further. Yeah. Yeah.
I started with simple. First of all, because it's a worldwide helpline on Facebook. Take a meter, divide it into 100 parts, take one part is for 1 centimeter. So everybody understands. Then 1000, then 10,000, etc. Go up to Fermi. So that is the teaching aid. It was
Yeah.
useful to many. Yeah.
Yeah, so that sort of teaching aid can be helpful. Yes, absolutely. So I mean, understanding that things are small is challenging because especially if you cannot manipulate things at length scale in an everyday experience. Okay, uh, so I will have some terminology, but this is related to a little bit towards my research, and I'll try to explain to you what is different. So in the last several years, starting from 2005, there has been sort of a revolution in way people have been trying to make electronics. Okay, and the genesis of this is work that was done starting in 2005, and which resulted in a Nobel Prize. It's actually on trying to make transistors out of graphene. Okay, what is graphene? So as I told you earlier, graphite is basically what's in your pencil. Okay, and when you write, essentially layers of that, pieces of that pencil fall off and get stuck to the fibers in the paper, and that's why you see what you have written. So imagine asking the question that I want to peel off only one layer of graphite. Okay, that layer is called graphene. It's only one atom thick, and it's precisely one atom thick. Okay, and that material is only made of carbon. So why is carbon important? We are all made of carbon in some sense. Carbon and water is the biggest component of our bodies. Okay, the rest of the elements are very small fraction. Okay, water and carbon. So carbon is all around the living world. Okay, and it has a complex cycle, and it gets incorporated in bodies. So making electronics out of something which is made of carbon has always been attractive rather than making it out of silicon, which is very common. So all of your transistors that are computers and everything else, they're made of technology which is based on silicon. But the living world that we know all around us does not have much silicon. Everything is made of carbon. So for many, many decades, people have been thinking that it would be nice to be able to make things out of carbon. And so these researchers, they found that carbon, which is arranged in a hexagon, so hexagonal form, at each of these places you have carbon atoms, and you imagine just like you have a ghari zali jaisi asते, there's a carbon atom, but it's hexagonal. That is the structure of graphite. And then you put one layer on top of each other, and that's how you get the big graphite crystal that you use in your pencil. And the one layer has just one sheet, so only one atom thick. And it has become possible to, over the last many, many years, about rapid progress in about 10 years, I'll go a little fast here, where people found some unusual properties about this kind of material. I'll tell you about the technology part a little bit later. What people found that the way the electrons move around in this layer is very different from what people knew before. So it's fundamentally different. And it is very unusual because the electrons in this material move around as if they are particles which are moving at very, very large velocities, which are called relativistic particles. Okay, so this is very unusual. So the electrons behave, that move around in graphene behave as if they are moving close to the velocity of light. Okay, velocity of light is the largest velocity in this universe. As we understand in today's world, physics, nothing can go faster than the velocity of light. Okay, so it's unusual and very exciting that electrons move as if, so they don't move at the velocity of light, but they move as if they are moving at velocity of light. So the description is as if the electrons in graphene behave like relativistic particles. Okay, so I don't want any misunderstanding. So they are not relativistic in the true sense, but they behave as if they are relativistic. So that makes them really unusual. And that was the thing that excited a lot of the people in this world. And the reason is that everything we know, this is one slide where things will be a little bit technical. Sorry? Yeah. I mean, so a lot of the description of how electrons move around, and whenever we talk about small things, we have to use laws which are described by quantum mechanics, which are, these laws are kind of confusing because if we try to connect them with today's everyday life's existence, they are slightly counterintuitive. They are not very natural. But Schrodinger equation is sort of an equation that Schrodinger gave a framework to understand how small particles like electrons or other subatomic particles behave. Okay, so every world around us, everything, like if I throw this pointer at you, its energy and its momentum or its velocity have a particular relationship. So energy is proportional to velocity square. Okay, so this is sort of also things that we learn in high school, that energy and velocity are related by v square. Now what happens is that the particles that move at very high velocities, which are relativistic particles, which are many of them around us, but they behave as if the relationship between energy and velocity is linear. Okay, it's fundamentally distinct. Okay, this is what we know in our everyday experience. The cars, the taxis in Bombay, everything kind of is related like this. But particles that are moving very, very fast, close to the velocity of light, their energy is related linearly to the momentum. And turns out that for graphene, or one kind of material that is in nanoscience, which is the sort of the topic that I'm talking about, it's very similar to the equation of particles which are moving close to the velocity of light. So these electrons are moving around very nicely, and they are quite different. So this had never been studied in the manner that can be studied with graphene. So people got really very excited that it not just is a very interesting material made of all of carbon, but it has some potential for electronics around us. Okay, and that sort of started a lot of exciting research all over the world and also in India. So there are several research labs in India which study these kind of devices, trying to make transistors which are only one atom thick. Okay. So let me go a little bit further. I'm going to possibly skip some of the things here because they are a little bit technical, but I want to first address a question that might be in your mind. What is a transistor? Because that is the fundamental building block, and we can make transistors out of this. So can I request somebody in the audience to maybe tell me what they think a transistor is inside a computer? What their conception of a transistor is. So I am at the most basic level. So the definition that I will give will certainly amuse you, but I want to hear what is the idea that you have in your head. So go ahead.
Switching device.
Switching device. That's very good. Okay. So can you say a little bit more? How does it switch? Like how can I think about it?
Controlling the voltage, you can turn it on or off.
Okay. So that's good. Okay. Anybody else has any idea about what a transistor is? It's a chip, but I'm asking, what is the essence of a transistor? What does a transistor do? Chip will help me think of it. Okay, it's some complex thing, but I want to understand what is inside a transistor. What does a transistor? So he gave some idea. Yeah, you have one more.
It contains a lot of power in small quantity.
Okay, that's interesting idea. Okay, yeah.
If you give some voltage in these two parts, another voltage is developed in these two parts.
Okay, so that's kind of related to what the gentleman here was saying. Maybe. Okay, that's also one way to say what kind of related to what he was saying. So let me go out. So all of these are kind of interesting answers. So what I would say is a transistor that is there in our all our electronics. You have used one version of it in your everyday life. You may have used it about less than 15 minutes back, and that's the tap. So you know, if you went to the restroom before this lecture, if you use a tap, you turn a knob, and the flow of water that is going through the tap increases or decreases because you turn the tap. So a transistor is a tap, but not for the flow of water, but for the flow of electrons. Okay, so it has two ends. Water is coming in and it drops out, and there is a third end, which is the knob which you turn on, to change the amount of flow. But in this case, it's a flow of electrons. At some point, as he said, I can tighten the knob completely and I can turn off the flow of water. That is a switch off. But a transistor at the heart is a flow. You can always think of it as a tap, but for electrons. Okay, so it is nice because to have a tap or a switch for electrons, because then you can do complex tasks like was said. If some flow of water is weak, by appropriately tuning the tap or the gate, it's in transistor, you can combine it with some other taps and you can increase the flow of water. So that's called amplification, as was said. So trying to make transistors has been sort of the foundation of our modern kind of existence. And the first fundamental discovery of a transistor was made at Bell Labs in about 1950s. And that was a very big transistor, and you can kind of search and find out what the transistor looks like. And that has reached a fundamental kind of building problems, that if you try to make this small tap smaller and smaller, in some sense that tap never turns off. So the water keeps leaking, or the electrons keep leaking. And the problem is, we all know that if you have a leaky tap anywhere in the house, somebody or the other in your housing society will come and kind of find you and make you sort of unhappy, because that's a kind of waste. Exactly in our modern electronic circuits, imagine if the electrons keep flowing, it's as if I'm providing energy on the top for the battery that is getting drained needlessly. Okay, so one of the drawbacks of miniaturization, of making transistors very, very small. So now the transistors that are there in your computer chips, they are roughly about 10 to 20 nanometers. This is the modern technology. But so you can pack many transistors, but making them small has led to this many other problems, but this main problem, that the taps are always leaky. So you're draining your batteries and you're running towards your chargers, a large fraction of our electricity is actually wasted by electronic devices, which will keep on draining energy. Okay, so now people are thinking, what is the next way we can make new kind of transistors which do not have this leaking tap problem? And even a reasonable progress on that direction will have a significant impact on the consumption of energy in our world. Okay, so not just in terms of miniaturization, if we can figure out new ways to make transistors, it would actually be beneficial for a lot of applications. So that's where these kind of materials come in, like graphene. There are a couple of other different materials which don't have this leaky tap problem, but at the same time they are very, very small. Because what can be smaller than something which is only one atom thick? The fundamental limit of our world around us, at least in terms of solid state physics, is one atom. There is a branch of physics which looks at what is inside the atom, but in terms of electronics, we have to stop at where individual atoms end. So these materials, which are called two-dimensional materials, because they don't have a height at all, it's only one atom, and they're kind of extended around in 2 dimensions. Let's imagine like a tile. They are only spreading in this direction, but nothing sort of grows in this direction. They are called 2D materials, and graphene is one of the first materials in this sort of family. So they are important candidates for eliminating some of the problems that our current technology is facing in terms of making next generation transistors, and that's why they are interesting and exciting. Okay, so I hope that gives some sense to why people are trying to look for new materials, because silicon technology has reached its fundamental limit in terms of miniaturization, and the more you try to miniaturize silicon technology, the more problems similar and other than the leaky tap problem that I told you is. Okay, so we also make transistors out of graphene, which is 1 atom thick, and I'll show you how we do it. It may seem like sort of unusual, but this is sort of for science. When we do scientific experiments, we don't really always worry about if I make a very large scale integrated circuit, how will I do it? We also work with some engineers who think more about large scale integration issues. We ask the question, if I make a transistor which is only 1 atom thick, how will the flow of electrons be different in it than what we already know? Okay, that's the kind of question that we try to ask in our everyday experiments. So if let me, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I don't know की technical जे lecture आहे त्याची terminology वगैरे आहे that's in English. I don't have a problem with Marathi, but there was some miscommunication by a newspaper. I think our host here can explain. I don't have a problem. I think some newspaper incorrectly. Actually, I don't want to get into the language issue.
जर इंग्रजीमध्ये आहेत, मराठीत भाषांतर केले तर ते दुप्पट अवघड जाते आणि त्या इंग्रजीमधल्या टर्म्स फक्त मराठीतलं क्रियापद आणि कर्ता घेऊन वापरल्या तरी समजणार.
मला तुम्ही प्रश्न नंतर विचारला, मी जेवढं जमेल तेवढं सांगू शकेन, बट I think it's hard to speak in Marathi in technical terms because we don't have those terms. I don't have a problem with speaking in Marathi.
इंग्रजीमध्ये ठेवणार असेल तर बोर्डवर लिहित इंग्रजीमध्ये लेक्चर आहे.
आतापर्यंत आपण पहिल्यांदा आपण आला नसतो बहुतेक
2-3 वेळा आलाय,
पण साधारणपणे ही जी भाषणं आहेत ही अगदी ज्याला आपण प्रगत विज्ञान म्हणतो, त्या प्रगत विज्ञानातली असल्यामुळे प्रत्येक बाबतीमध्ये मराठी प्रतिशब्द देऊन समजावून सांगणं हे सोपं नाही. आपल्याला ऐकायला फक्त असं वाटतं की कानावरती मराठी पडलं, परंतु त्यांना ते शिरताना ते अडचण येणार. तर त्यांना मी ज्या भाषेत शिकली आहे, ज्या भाषेत त्यांना सोपं वाटतं, त्यांना आम्ही नेहमी सांगतो की तुम्हाला ज्या भाषेत सांगणं सोपं वाटेल त्या भाषेत तुम्ही सांगा, कारण शेवटी ते आपल्याला सांगणार. तर ते प्रयत्न करतात, परंतु तरी देखील जर कोणाची गैरसोय झाली असेल तर सॉरी.
ऍक्च्युली तुम्ही प्रश्न विचारू शकता, मी जेवढा होईल प्रयत्न करीन, पण हा भाषेचा नॉर्मल टर्मिनॉलॉजी नाही आहे, तर मी इन्व्हेंट करणार वर्ड आणि तुम्हाला सांगणार त्याच्यात काही अर्थ नाही. मला मराठी बोलता येतं, पण त्या टेक्निकल टर्म्सला काही अल्टरनेटिव्ह नाही आहे.
एवढंच आमचं म्हणणं
थोडा मिक्स वापर. Okay, so let's see. जर का आपल्याला graphene बनवायचं असेल, if you want to make graphene, how do we make it? How do we make something which is only 1 atom thick? The people who got the Nobel Prize, they thought of an ingenious way to make a graphene which is only 1 atom thick. So the method that I'm going to show you is a small video. After you see it, you will be amazed because it seems so simple that method eventually led to a Nobel Prize research. So त्याची जी बेसिक आयडिया इतकी सोपी आहे की एक क्रिस्टल तुम्ही घ्यायचा ग्राफाईटचा आणि तो एका टेपच्या मध्ये टाकायचा आणि हाच मेथड आम्ही यूज करतो ट्रान्झिस्टर and these are excellent transistors. You take that crystal of graphite tape मध्ये आणि सेलो टेप सारखं and you peel it off many times. Okay, and this sounds very crazy that you have something which is thick that you can peel off. So you don't get one layer all the time, but if you work hard, and many of my students work very hard, प्रयत्न केला की तुम्हाला एक मायक्रोस्कोप खाली एक atom thick layer मिळणार. Okay, so it's just very simple idea. You take this tape, that tape has lots of different thicknesses in one shot. You put it and you try to transfer that layer to a piece of silicon. Okay, that square piece is a piece of silicon, and that you just put it in a microscope. You will see an image, and I'll show you many more in a microscope. A simple optical microscope, the simplest that you can find in any college. You don't really need complicated things. So you take this and you put it in a microscope, and you look at the microscope, or you can look at a camera which is attached to a microscope, and you'll see things which look like very faint, almost unbelievable that you might think that they are some stain marks on your silicon. These are very thin, and they are getting to be 1 atom, 2 atom, 3 atom thick. Okay, and you can see them with a simple optical microscope, and that's sort of what we use. Okay, and that layer, it is in terms of side dimension, it's not very large, but it's big enough to make for scientific experiments. It's big enough to make electronic circuits. I'll show you what we make. Okay, so the basic idea is very simple. So the video should have helped everybody understand what how one can make things which are very small. So these are things that we make. And once this triangular piece, हा जो त्रिकोण दिसतोय हा एकच ॲटम जाडीचा आहे, आणि त्याच्याच वरनं इलेक्ट्रॉनिक ट्रान्झिस्टर बनवता येतो. तर ह्याचे कनेक्शन्स कसे करायचे मी ते तुम्हाला नेक्स्ट दाखवतो. लेट्स गो टू द नेक्स्ट स्लाइड. दिस इज अ लिटल बिट टेक्निकल, सो लेट मी शो यू अ व्हिडिओ. ओके, सो ह्या अशा छोट्या गोष्टीवर कनेक्शन करायचे हा एक स्टँडर्ड प्रोसिजर आहे, आणि हा प्रोसिजर ह्या व्हिडिओवर तुम्हाला दिसेल. ह्याच्यावर एक प्रकारचा प्लास्टिक घालायचा, ग्राफीनची जो आहे तो त्याच्यावर एक प्लास्टिक कोट करायचा, आणि हा जो प्लास्टिकची लेअर असते ती इलेक्ट्रॉन बीमला सेन्सिटिव्ह आहे. तर इलेक्ट्रॉन बीम त्याच्यावर इन्सिडेंट झाली की जिथे जिथं ती इलेक्ट्रॉन बीम त्या मटेरियलला हिट झाली आहे त्याचे केमिकल रिॲक्शन होते, आणि कार्बनचे जे मॉलिक्युलर वेट आहे तो चेंज होतो, आणि तो रिमूव्ह करता येतो. एका प्रकारे त्या पॉलिमरमध्ये एक होल करता येतो. त्याचं सगळ्यात सोपं मार्ग मी तुम्हाला सांगेन कसं विचार करायचा त्याच्याबद्दल. पण त्याच्यानंतर त्याच्यावरनं एका प्रकारे गोल्ड किंवा सोन्याची जी फिल्म आपण डिपॉझिट केली, लिटरली इव्हॅपोरेट करायचं, गोल्ड वितळायचा, आणि त्याची एक प्रकारची भाप तयार होते. ती डिपॉझिट झाली की त्या भोकातनं जाणार, आणि जिथं तो जो मटेरियल आपल्याला त्याचं इलेक्ट्रॉनिक डिव्हाइस बनवायचा आहे तिथं तो बरोबर जाणार, आणि आजूबाजूला तो पॉलिमर प्लास्टिकवर तो गोल्ड किंवा सोन्याची परत राहणार, आणि ती काढता येते. त्याप्रमाणे मग आपल्याला एक्झॅक्टली जिथं तो ग्राफीन होता त्याच्यावर इलेक्ट्रिकल कनेक्शन करता येतात. ओके, तर मी पाहिजे तर मी एकदा अजून व्हिडिओ दाखवतो, कारण हा सॉर्ट ऑफ सेंट्रल आयडिया आहे. ही बेसिक आयडिया ह्याला लिथोग्राफी म्हणतात. दॅट इज द बेसिस ऑफ ऑल द टेक्नॉलॉजी, ऑल द ट्रान्झिस्टर्स दॅट यू नो. Of course, I'm simplifying them, so don't think that this is exactly what people do, but some complex version of it and done many times is what results in the transistor that you use. Okay, so this is like a stencil. So many of you may have used a stencil for drawing some letters. So instead you are making a stencil using a plastic polymer layer, and you deposit metal there and you get the pattern that you want for the electrical connection. That is the central idea of lithography. And many complex steps are done to make transistors that for integrated circuits or processors that you use, but we use a very simple process. So by this, even though something is very small, we can make electrical connection to it. That's sort of the essence that I want to convey to you. Okay, so once you have such a small structure, we can make transistors. I will show you in the next few slides images of things from my own lab, which hopefully should give you an idea. So I'm going to skip some of this. I can come back to it later. So imagine I have graphene here, and I want to make electrical connections by the method that I just explained to you. I can do that, and after making the electrical connections, it looks something like this. So just to give you an idea how small things are, This from this point to this point is the diameter of your hair. So if you pluck your hair and you put it, it will completely cover this whole device. Okay, and here is graphene, which is only 1 atom thick. So these are electrical connections to the graphene, which we made and my students routinely make, which have a diameter of about half a micron, which is about 1/200th of human hair diameter. So if you एक human hair घेतला त्याचे 200 parts केले की त्याचा जो सगळ्यात लहान part असतो तो हा टोकाचा part आहे. So you can make small connections to things which are very small, only 1 atom thick. So you can make transistors. Okay, and that's what we do. Okay, so these are. So now you will say, why make transistors like this? One reason I told you is that using these kind of materials, you can make transistors which are not leaky. Okay, and there's a family of 2D materials. एका प्रकारे पूर्ण परिवार आहे. Since the Nobel Prize was given, there have been a lot of discoveries which can be peeled off to atomic level, and then you can make electronic transistors out of it. Now, why is this kind of transistor interesting is because these electrons that I put in from these electrical connections inside, they travel long distances without bouncing into anything inside. So imagine if you go to VT or CST station at this time, and you want to go from the entrance to the fast local, which is going to Kalyan station. Now, if you are an electron, you will bounce into a lot of obstructions if you are trying to get into, and that every time you bounce, तुम्ही collision परत कोणीतरी obstruction येणार आणि त्या collision मध्ये energy वाया जाते. So it is not ideal that if there are some imperfections, if there is a pillar, कचऱ्याचा डबा किंवा काही असेल तर तुम्ही obstruction every collision will take away some energy. Just like for humans, if you are late and at the end of the day you are tired and you are running toward the station and you have obstructions, it's not great. So exactly for electrons, the same problem. Now, if I make a system like this with graphene, it has clearly no imperfections. You put the electron here, it does not bounce into anything, it goes to the other side without bouncing into any other obstruction. So these are transistors which are, by terminology, technical terminology, they are called ballistic transistors, which electron just goes like a straight line without bouncing into imperfection, and these can work very, very fast. Okay, they can work much faster than the transistors that we know, and that's one of the motivations for trying to make transistors which are made of materials like these. Okay, and that's one of the reasons we try to. So one way to measure how easily they move is a length called mean free path, which is basically the distance the electron moves before it bounces into some imperfection. So that mean free path is very large. In typical systems that we know, it's much smaller than 8 micrometers. Okay, so that's why we try to make transistors out of this. Okay, so now, this is one area of, so electronics is one area that is very exciting from the perspective of nanoscience and nanotechnology, and I hope I gave you some idea of what are the advantages. So let me enumerate. एक advantage असा आहे की जो नळ आहे तुमचा तो दर वेळेला वाहत राहणार, तो वाहणार नाही. आणि दुसरा ॲडव्हान्टेज असा आहे की जे ऑब्स्ट्रक्शन असतात, अडथळे असतात, ते इलेक्ट्रॉनला एका बाजूनी जे दुसऱ्या एंडला जायचे आहेत ते कमी होतात, एका प्रकारे ट्रान्झिस्टर बनवलं जातात. हे दोन ॲडव्हान्टेजेस आहेत. त्याच्याशिवाय बरेच ॲडव्हान्टेजेस आहेत, जसे जर का तुम्हाला डिटेक्ट करायची असेल लाईट, एका प्रकारचे सोलर सेल सारखे बनवायचे असेल तर ते पण काही लोकांनी डिस्कव्हरीज केले, ते खूप ॲडव्हान्टेजेस आहेत. पण मी सिम्पल ठेवणार आहे so that it's easier, but there are lots of advantages. So let me move to another advantage, which is an area where we do research in at EIFR, which will hopefully be of interest to you. So imagine that you have things which are very small, and now you want to look at the mechanics of it. So easiest way to think of it is, if you imagine you have a tabla, okay, and the drum of the tabla is not made of a cloth, but is made out of something which is only 1 atom thick, okay, a very, 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 very thin tabla. Why? I want to ask a question. What would be the interest in trying to make something like this? You know, a very small tabla which has, for the drum part, it only is 1 atom thick. And I will try to convey the sort of motivation for this. And the idea is very simple. So some of you are musicians here or have interest in music. So let me pose a question to them. Imagine you are playing a sitar or a guitar, and there is a butterfly. You're supposedly in the in a garden, and you pluck some note, and the butterfly lands on it, on the string which is vibrating. Now, what do you think will happen? कुणाला माहिती आहे की काय आयडियाज आहेत काय होऊ शकेल? सो तुम्ही गिटार किंवा सितार वाजवताय आणि ती एक स्ट्रिंग जी आहे ती तुम्ही ओढली आहे आणि त्याच्यातनं एक नोट येते बाहेर आणि त्याच्यावर एक बटरफ्लाय येऊन बसते. तर आता काय होणार? नोट चेंज होईल. ओके, अजून काही? ओके, दॅट्स ऑल्सो व्हेरी गुड, रिलेटेड टू द आन्सर दॅट ही गेव. Okay, that's also true. Okay, that is related to what he said, and energy will be absorbed. So, yeah, so actually it turns out the first... okay, that's also possible. Actually, the first answer, and others are also correct, but first answer is the sort of the heart of the problem, that the moment the butterfly or a mosquito, lands on it, the note will change. Okay, so if you measure the vibration frequency of the note before and after the butterfly landed, from basic physics principles, you can calculate the mass of the butterfly or the mass of the mosquito. So is the idea clear? You have a string, it's vibrating, some sound is coming out, some note is coming out. And now a butterfly lands on it, some of the things, the sound will reduce a little bit, but the note at which it is resonating will actually change. And there are a lot of scientific technologies, you can actually measure that frequency very accurately. So you measure the frequency before and after, it will be different to your ear, but you can have some electronic instruments that measure it very accurately. If you measure it accurately, you can calculate what the mass of the butterfly is. Okay. So this is unusual. So you will not use this kind of a method to measure the mass of a butterfly. It's a crazy method. But it is good for giving an example, because then everybody gets interested in it. But now imagine I want to measure the mass of a single atom. I want to measure mass of 1 atom, or I want to measure the mass of a virus. How do I do it? It's already very small. It's only roughly about 10 nanometers to 20 nanometers wide, typical virus. How can I put it in a weighing balance to measure it? It's not possible. Okay? Otherwise I have to measure a whole large number of them. So there is requirement to measure mass of individual viruses or small objects like atoms, and it has lots of potential application, and this is a major area of research worldwide and also to some extent in India, and that is for mass detection. So these objects which are very light and they are vibrating, they are very sensitive detectors of mass. So if you use them to measure mass, you can identify what that object is. You can tell whether it's a gold atom, or it's a silver atom, or it's an atom made of iron, or if it's a virus of one kind or another. In terms of the basic fundamental science, we are already reached that point that we can identify individual atoms which land on it. The hope is that in technology, mass production of these kind of mechanical objects, these are called micro electromechanical systems or nanomechanical systems, that you may be able to in future buy, just like now you can buy small cartridges to detect blood glucose level for people who have diabetes related problems. You buy these cartridges and you have the electronic box, and in the morning you drop a blood, and it automatically tells you what the sugar level is. So the idea is that these kind of devices, electromechanical devices, will someday be actually important for small diagnostics lab right there for you. So you drop your blood, for example. And this is what I'm about to say now is a bit of a science fiction, but this is motivating a large number of researchers that you drop a blood, there is some processing that goes on inside a chip, and it actually is able to diagnose for you potentially what your ailment is. Again, this does not exist in market or anything, so I don't want to give any wrong ideas, but this is what motivates a large body of researchers, that now we have a small weighing balance inside that electronic circuit, which will tell us what is the virus. Okay, so this motivates a lot of the research in worldwide and also in our lab. This is an example that some researchers did experiment where landing of 10 atoms, 50 atoms can be detected real time. So you make a string like this of something which is very, very light, and things land on it, and you can tell, okay, 10 atoms have just landed, another 12, 15. So it is really amazing that now you are able to tell the arrival of atoms on as you are watching those atoms land. And the motivation, of course, as I said, is the making of sensors. And this has been demonstrated. I already kind of showed you gave you an idea. So we work in this area as well. So we make structures, this is some of our work, we make structures out of graphene. So why, again, graphene, we do a lot of different work in our lab. I wanted to have a common thread, so same hero throughout the movie. So I told you about electronic properties of graphene. So I'm telling you now about mechanical properties of graphene. This graphite is a very strong material inside the plane. You cannot break it easily. So even if it's 1 atom thick, it has very nice mechanical properties, and that's why we are interested in it. So this is an image taken with not an optical microscope, it's a scanning electron microscope. So it's a microscope made by shining electrons and measuring the electrons that get reflected back. So you can see things which are small. Otherwise, simple microscope cannot see these details. So this is a small ribbon of graphene that we made, which is about 100 nanometers above the ground. So it's a 3D structure. So this is a ribbon. Inside there's nothing. It's freely hanging. And it can vibrate. Okay, and these are the electrical connections which allow us to measure electrical signals, to measure its vibrational frequency. And that is very close to the example I gave. This is sort of a guitar string or a sitar string made out of a ribbon of graphene. And this vibrates at frequencies which a human ear cannot detect. So human ear can detect frequencies which are lesser than about 10 to 15 kilohertz. These small structures, so this width, the part over which it's free hanging, is just about 2 micrometers. So again, hair, you chop it up into 50 parts. The smallest part, that is this length. Okay, and in terms of the thickness of this ribbon, it's only 1 atom thick. So these things are very small. They vibrate at 100 megahertz. Okay, so 100 megahertz is close to the frequency at which the electrical signals come for your radio station. If you listen to FM radio, it's something close to 100 megahertz. Some of you might listen to, I think All India Radio has an FM channel which is close to 100 megahertz, but around 90 megahertz often you will get lots of signals. So the point that I want to make is that these structures have frequencies which are very high, which is also desirable for some of the applications. Okay, let me now try to go a little bit fast and tell you some other interesting properties about it. About graphene that we study is that it's impermeable. So even though it's 1 atom thick, imagine तुमच्या घरी जाळी आहे आणि तुम्ही काहीतरी वर टाकता आणि बऱ्याच गोष्टी दुसऱ्या बाजूला येतात आणि ती जाळी जरी जाड असली तरी दुसऱ्या बाजूला येतात. ही जी जाळी आहे, जी असे षटकोन आहेत, त्याचा आतला जो स्ट्रक्चर आहे, ती त्याच्यात अशी जरी भोक दिसत असले मध्ये, तरी ती इम्परमिएबल आहे कम्प्लिटली. ॲटम्स आणि मॉलिक्युल्स त्याच्यातनं जाऊ शकत नाही दुसऱ्या बाजूला. तर एक त्याची परत मी रिपीट करू, कारण मी जेव्हा पहिल्यांदा ह्याचा अनुभव घेतला रिसर्चमध्ये किंवा ऐकलं त्याच्याबद्दल सायंटिफिक रिपोर्ट, आय वॉज सरप्राईज की एक ॲटम एवढा थिक आहे, म्हणजे अगदी त्याची जी जाडी आहे खूप कमी आहे, पण त्याच्यातनं काही जाऊ शकत नाही दुसऱ्या बाजूला. अँड दॅट इज काइंड ऑफ अमेझिंग आस्पेक्ट. तर तो जो भाग आहे तो नॅनो टेक्नॉलॉजीमध्ये त्याचे बरेच ॲप्लिकेशन्स आहेत. एक ॲप्लिकेशन असं आहे की बऱ्याच मटेरियल्सना करोजन होतं. तर ग्राफीन रिसर्चचा एक भाग आहे तो कोटिंग्स करायचं मटेरियल्सवर ग्राफीननी. तो इम्परमिएबल होतो. गॅसेस म्हणजे ऑक्सिजन, मॉइश्चर, केमिकल्स नी त्यांना हार्डन करता येतं, म्हणजे सो दॅट दे बिकम केमिकल रेझिस्टन्स. That's sort of one area of research that people are investigating and is related to what we do. And possibly this is a little bit more technical, but what we study in my lab is to make drums. So I'll show you an example. We make drums like these. This is a cartoon picture. We make small tabla out. I showed you already a ribbon, but there are some technological reasons why it's actually better to make not a ribbon or a guitar string, but to make a tabla-like thing. So we make a small hole in silicon and then cover it up with graphene, and then essentially make a kind of transistor which allows us to measure the vibration. So the vibration of these one atom thick membranes is very, very small, but we can use technology that we know to measure that vibration very, very accurately. Okay, so that's sort of amazing that these membranes are vibrating by only 1 nanometer or few nanometers, but you can actually measure their motion very accurately. I think rest of the part is a little bit more technical. I will skip it, but rather I'll be happy to take more questions and try to answer any other curiosity that you have, rather than show you more technical. If you're interested in the technical part, maybe you can come to me after the lecture and I'll be happy to tell you. I hope I gave you an idea. I wanted to give you a connection to what we are doing, not maybe more than 3 kilometers from here. So India is rapidly kind of moving in a direction where we are catching up with cutting edge research all over the world, and we are working very hard so that we make an impact on a global scale, not just on a sort of national scale. Okay, so I thank you for your patience. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. Thank you. Yeah.
I have a publication level question. Suppose you conduct an experiment and do whatever answer fabrication and all, and you conduct experiments on it. Then you get a results, and then while publishing, you write a scientific paper and then publish it, right? But who verifies those results in that paper?
Okay, so this is a little bit technical, but I'll briefly answer later. Maybe we can talk more. So what happens is when we do scientific research, or anybody does scientific research anywhere in the world, it cannot be the fundamental basis of scientific progress is that just because I say it, nobody else will believe it. Okay, not because they don't respect me, but because that is how science works. Science just doesn't work on statement; it asks for evidence. So when I say I have discovered something or I made a transistor, I have to measure and write an article, put the evidence there, then it goes to a scientific journal, okay, which will go to an editor, will send it anonymously to some 3-4 other researchers anywhere in the world. Okay, they will read, they will ask questions and say, okay, this information is not there, we want to see that information. Then they send a report anonymously. We don't know who they are. The editor will send that information to us and say, can you address this? If I can answer all their questions and their whatever doubts they have, whether I have really done the experiment, I will make a response, modify my report, send it back to the editor. He will send it back to those reviewers. These are called reviewers. They will again look through the whole manuscript, and if they say okay, then the editor will say, okay, this can be now considered a valid finding, and they publish an article. Of course, that's never always a completely foolproof method. There can be sometimes genuine mistakes, like every aspect of human life. There are, of course, some cases of cheating, but they are found. If you make some invalid claim, the scientific process will eventually find out sooner or later, and you know, the worst punishment that can happen in a scientific sort of environment is that people will say that this guy who does experiments or this person does experiments which are not trustworthy. There is nothing worse than that. And that can pretty much be the end of your career. Okay.
3D printing is a part of this nanotechnology?
No, 3D printing specifically isn't. It doesn't really need nanotechnology. It's a revolutionary technology, but it doesn't need any aspect of nanotechnology to work as of now. It basically, if you know extrusion, extrusion of material from, it is some more modern version of one version of 3D printing. Is kind of extrusion process by which you assemble complex structures, but it directly doesn't have anything to do with nanotechnology.
So what are the applications in day-to-day life?
That's a good question, and I mean, I'll be honest that there has been a lot of excitement about nanoscience and nanotechnology for now several years. I would say something like 10, 15 years. And you can critically ask yourself, what are the applications which have fundamentally revolutionized, let's say, everyday life? And the honest answer is there are not very many. So there is a lot of excitement in terms of scientific possibilities, but I'll give you a few examples, but it's not like it's there everywhere. And a lot of time around us, there is false advertisement. Washing machines will say nanotechnology. I mean, you cannot believe them completely, okay? But let me just go some direction towards reality and tell you there are certainly some places where it has made an impact in terms of making kind of optical devices. Particular kind of display technologies have benefited immensely from nanotechnology. So they're making small quantum dot structures. They're already there, and they are part of displays. So in that sense, they are there. In terms of catalysis, in terms of trying to make some chemical reactions work better, there is progress. And in terms of the scientific part, understanding how molecular machines work, there is progress, but application-wise, there are coatings, lots of coatings, and some of them are genuine. You might have seen some advertisement for clothes which are stain-proof. So in terms of coatings on materials, that is genuine progress. Okay, transistors based on silicon technology are already there. They are, in some sense, from nanotechnology, but their basic transistor is, its width, smallest feature is about 20 nanometers. Okay, so there are examples, but there is no one product that I can say that it has fundamentally changed human existence. But there is, some potential. Yeah.
When these things are so small, how do you manipulate them?
Yeah.
That is one question. Second, when the dimensions change drastically, why do properties change?
Good. These are very exciting questions. So let me first answer the first question. Okay. So when things are that small, as I told you, light that we know, which is electromagnetic radiation. So anything that you use electromagnetic radiation to see has to be comparable to the wavelength of that electromagnetic radiation. Okay? So light has a wavelength which is about 500 nanometers, the visible light. So you cannot see anything smaller than 500 nanometers with visible light. Okay? Now, so you need some other kind of tools to see it. So one way people first step for manipulating is to be able to see them. And the way you see them is, instead of using light, you use a beam of electrons. So you take electrons and you make a beam of it, and you shine the beam of electrons at the object that you want to see. The electrons will bounce from it, and you collect those electrons. And just like in the eye, the light bounces off, let's say this wall, reaches my eye back, then I can say that I can see it. Exactly the same way the electron bounces off the small thing, and I have a detector, not I, this is all in a scientific instrument, that says, okay, the electron has come back. That allows me to make an image, like the one I just showed you. This image is not made by a normal microscope or light at all. It's an image made using a scanning electron microscope. And that allows you to see it. Once you can see it, you can think of lots of ways to manipulate it. Okay? There are lots of schemes to manipulate it, but there isn't, if one thinks of a small, kind of chimta, there is no small chimta. It doesn't exist. And there is a reason for it, that these things, like small things, have a attractive force which is called a van der Waals forces. So any two small things, one which is very small, two surfaces like to stick to each other, even if there is no glue. That attractive force is very strong, so you cannot use a chimta to kind of peel it off or manipulate it, so it's hard and challenging. But there are tools to either you grow them at the locations you want, then you don't have to pick them up and place them. So there are strategies that you can use. So that answers your first question. Now, second question, why do properties change so much as you change the dimension? There are lots of different ways to kind of address it. Let me take the example of optical properties. Okay, and the easiest way to think about it is, if you take a gold, gold everybody knows is, when it's large size, it has this golden color. Okay, now if you try to make small and small pieces of it, it actually doesn't look the same color. It starts becoming pink, even maroon, when the things are particles of gold are about 5 nanometers. Okay, and that is radical change. It's the same atoms, nothing has changed. It is just that how light, electromagnetic radiation, interacts with those small particles is fundamentally different from how it interacts with a big piece of gold. What we perceive as color, we think of it as a paint that we put on something and we see the red, blue, green. But at a fundamental level, color comes from the fact that how electromagnetic radiation interacts with that material. When you say it's pink colored, it is because your eye detects a change in the spectrum and you think it's pink color. So the short answer to your question is, how electromagnetic radiation interacts with material and changing dimension can change the color completely.
Still, gold is gold.
Ah.
Why should the electromagnetic radiation give a different result?
Okay, yeah. So that's a good question. Let me go back to the point that I was making earlier. So electromagnetic radiation has this wavelength over which it is vibrating. It's tarang म्हणतात. It has a wavelength. So length over which it is has waves. So now if you make something which is smaller than the wavelength of that electromagnetic radiation, how that tarang interacts with that material changes fundamentally. I mean, I will not be able to give all the details because there is some complex physics behind it. But that wave, when it gets reflected back and eye sees it, that is what is the definition of seeing. And that is the definition of what color is.
So what's about complementary color? One is absorbed, other is reflected.
Yeah, so I'm not making the distinction. I'm making the distinction that how light interacts with that material fundamentally depends not just on the material but on its size. And that has to do with the fact that one simple analogy, if you can think about it, is now there are no small antennas, but in the earlier era you had these antennas. Okay, big antennas you put on the top of your home and you get the electrical. Now you have dish or you get cable. But let's go back to that antenna. The size of the antenna there was related to the wavelength of the electromagnetic taranga wave. So if that antenna was one size, it said that you have some waves of particular kind will be caught by that antenna and sent to your TV. Now you can think of particles of gold as kind of small antennas. So if you put them, how they will interact with that electromagnetic radiation changes. Because if you want a different wave, if you want to get, for example, if you want to get cell phone, for example, it has electromagnetic radiation coming at roughly about 1 gigahertz. Radio, the antenna from your car, which is sticking out typically, is different frequency. It's about wavelength frequency is about 100 megahertz. I already told you. The antenna has a particular length. The length of the antenna determines what part of the electromagnetic spectrum you kind of receive or connect to, and that is related to it. I mean, it's that's right. So how the electromagnetic radiation couples with matter, it's not coupling with the atom, but it's the electrons that are inside that gold, they are moving around in response to that electromagnetic wave. That changes when you make it, the electrons, in a very small space.
Send a stream of electrons
Yeah.
at that small particle or whatever.
Yeah.
You will be displacing it, isn't it?
So that you can displace it if it's completely isolated. If the surface on which it's not it's sitting is not adhering very well to that particle. But as I told you, all small things, the adhesive force, it's called the van der Waals force, is actually very strong. So for small things, the net effect is that if you take a very small thing and you put it on a surface, the force seems like a very, very large force to be able to displace it. So it's not easy to move things around. So that thing may look slippery, but it's not slippery. Everything wants to stick to it. Yeah.
शेतीमध्ये झाडांना ज्यावेळेस अन्नद्रव्य शोषण करायचं असतं त्यावेळेस आपण समजा अन्नद्रव्यांना नॅनो पार्टिकलच्या लेवलवर आणलं तर त्यावेळेस आपण त्याला शोषणाची क्षमता वाढवू शकतो का आणि याचंच शेतीच्या झाडांना रोग थांबवण्यासाठी किंवा कीटक मारण्यासाठी आपण वापर करू शकतो.
सो मी ह्या विषयातला तज्ज्ञ नाही आहे, तो पहिलं सांगतो. सो आपल्याला वाटतं की आपण छोटे छोटे भाग केले तर त्यातनं काम सोपं होईल. तसं नाही आहे. ॲक्च्युली एक वेगळा विषय आहे रिसर्चचा नॅनो सायन्स आणि नॅनो टेक्नॉलॉजीमध्ये. तो टॉक्सिकॉलॉजी बघतो की असे जे स्मॉल पार्टिकल्स आहेत किंवा वेगवेगळे नॅनो पार्टिकल्स बनवतो त्याच्यात जो नॅचरल वर्ल्ड आहे आपल्याबरोबर जैविक संसार आहे त्याच्यावर किती टॉक्सिक आहे. तर एक तर मी ह्या विषयातलं तज्ञ नाही, पण असं स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड नाही आहे की छोटे पार्ट केले की त्याचं ऑब्झॉर्प्शन जास्त होईल. त्याचा एका विपरीत परिणाम पण होऊ शकतो की ते टॉक्सिक आहे. So I cannot answer this question because I'm not an expert, but what I want to caution is that just making things small may not necessarily have the result that you expect from everyday existence, that okay, you make it small, the plant absorbs it better. It may actually be harmful. It may be good, but I don't know the answer, so I will not say anything. Yeah.
नॅनोटेक्नॉलॉजी बऱ्याच क्षेत्रामध्ये वापरता येत असते, तुम्हाला माहिती. त्यामध्ये माझे 3 प्रश्न आहेत. एक, टचिंग मस्क्युलर डिस्ट्रोफी, जीन म्युटेशनमध्ये जो DNA वगैरे याच्यामध्ये जो प्रॉब्लेम, अशा रोगामध्ये नॅनोटेक्नॉलॉजीचा काही उपाय करता येईल का? दुसरं असं की बाहेर आता व्यवहारामध्ये बाबा बुवा लोक सांगतात की पॉझिटिव्ह एनर्जी, निगेटिव्ह एनर्जी, असं तुम्ही काहीतरी टेक्नॉलॉजी कडून त्याचे शोधून त्यांना जर उत्तर काही देता आलं तर ते बरं होईल असं मला एक वाटतं. दुसरं असं
ओके, गुड क्वेश्चन. मी तिसरा प्रश्न आधी सांगतो. सर, वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारचे सेन्सर्स, जसं आता फॉर एक्झाम्पल मिनरल्स डिटेक्ट करायचे असतील काही, किंवा ह्युमिडिटी, किंवा पर्टिक्युलर काइंड ऑफ केमिकलचं जे डिटेक्शन आहे, ते प्रकारचे सेन्सर्स एक मेजर एम्फसिस आहे. आणि आत्ता डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ सायन्स अँड टेक्नॉलॉजी इंडियामध्ये खूप इन्व्हेस्ट करते असे सेन्सर्स जे ॲग्रिकल्चरमध्ये डिप्लॉय करता येतील. नॉट क्लायमेट चेंज, बट डिटेक्शन ऑफ सिम्पल थिंग्स लाईक केमिकल्स. जसं मी म्हटलं की तुम्ही एका प्रकारे लॅबोरेटरीमध्ये घेऊन जाण्यापेक्षा काही तुमच्याकडे काही इक्विपमेंट असेल, त्याच्यातनं तुम्हाला ऑन साईट कळेल की काय कॉम्पोजिशन आहे. हां, सो बेसिक सेन्सेस त्याच्याबद्दल बरंच रिसर्च आहे. आणि स्पेसिफिकली डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ सायन्स अँड टेक्नॉलॉजीचा प्रोग्राम आहे ॲग्रिकल्चरल सेन्सर्स बनवायला. रिसर्चर्सना रिसर्च फंडिंग आहे. सो that is possible, and there is a lot of interest. So that's the third question. Now, first question was, okay, so it may not seem like a good answer, but I'm not an expert in biology, so I don't want to make a fool of myself and say something. There is a lot of research that goes on in the world, also in India. I don't know the answer. About this specific disease, I don't know. But there is a lot of research going on, and maybe, there are a lot of new things happening in biology. You might have heard of CRISPR-Cas technology, which is a radically new method of essentially correcting fixing genetic errors in a very simple way. This is a very revolutionary technology, and I'm not an expert. Maybe my suggestion would be you can ask somebody else from other institutes, or certainly at TIFR, who can come and talk about CRISPR-Cas. It may revolutionize, human health and how we treat diseases in a radically different way. And I'll stop at that point. I'm not an expert, but I'll just mention that there are very exciting discoveries in this field. Coming to the second question, I think I think that's a part of human society that we believe in what we want to believe in, and there is unfortunately no cure from science and technology. Society believes in something, even if the truth is staring them in the face, they will ignore the truth. It's a human condition that we want to believe in only what we want to believe in because it's convenient, it makes sense. Science, unfortunately, it provides a certain level of comfort that, okay, you understand the world. But again, I'm not an expert in this, but we can only communicate science. So there is a lot of in India, there is a lot of problem with science communication at a basic level. That I think scientific community is trying to do, but as specifically, there is nothing that I can add to that. Many reasons, yeah. There are some questions. मी तुमचा प्रश्न सांगेन आधी बाकी कोणी विचारले त्यांना अजून नाही मिळाले. So maybe, yeah. Yeah. So the graphite जो आहे तो त्याला जे conditions growth ची डायमंडची त्याच्यापेक्षा वेगळ्या आहेत, but it's possible. People make synthetic graphite. Unusual thing is that graphite is India is, I think, world's third largest producer of graphite. You can basically get it from the mine, dig it and get the graphite out. But synthetically also graphite banota hai to. Yeah, absolutely. You can make it. Not necessarily nanotechnology, it's sort of metallurgy and material science, but it's related. So synthetically, steel production is a byproduct of very high quality graphite. It's called Kish graphite. It's a Japanese term, but when you make large scale steel Tata Steel, for example, they get kish graphite as a byproduct of the steel manufacturing. Right. No, I think right. So it's a. I will. So as scientists, we have to be. I'm personally. Let me say, I'm personally responsible. I feel that I have to be able to address the criticism. So I'm not going to deflect that question. So yeah. So I don't know the exact word. So we have, as a country, we have to grow and make a bigger impact. For our size, we are now not scientifically making the impact that we make. To give you some numbers, at current stage in physics research, India is roughly, okay, so how you rank it is subjective, okay, but roughly it's about 10th in the world in terms of let's say research productivity. One माप जे असतात ते वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारचे असू शकतात, पण एका माप जर का धरला तर त्याच्या प्रमाणे भारत 10th आहे. Okay, so no, it's so let me give you an example. Who is 11th? Then you can ask whether we are at, you know, we are at the same kind of, we are punching at our level, or we are, you know, heavyweight person boxing with kind of you know lightweight. So the countries that are in the neighborhood are Italy or other countries. So these are there as a country, the productivity of Italy being comparable to India or is not accurate, right? Because look at the size of India. I mean, not just the geographical size, but I mean the intellectual capital that we have. So we are certainly not reached our potential, but let me also add that for many years of our existence, the kind of scientific research that we could do was because of the funding for research was limited. Okay, so we have a long tradition of researchers who do theoretical physics, you know, or theoretical science, because for that you don't need expensive equipment. Now, in the last 15 years, there has been a rapid growth. Okay, now let me say I am an experimentalist, so I actually make these transistors. I think there is a rapid growth, but you know, 15 years back, the constraints, the boundaries in which researchers had to do research was very tight. The money was not there. You cannot, I mean, you cannot make everything. You can make some things, but if you keep on making every equipment, then you will not be able to do the research that you're supposed to do. So you need funding to do research. That has radically changed in the last 15 years. Before that, the situation was tight. If people could not go to conference because there was no money available to go to a conference, that has an overall bearing. So I am optimistic. I think that particular essence of the criticism that you said, there may be some merit to it, but it's possibly too harsh. Okay, and it's at some level it's unfair, because you are saying I want to play top level cricket, but you are you are not giving them helmets, you are not giving them pads, so it's a problem. So I hope that addresses some question. Maybe one more or two more and we'll stop. One more question. Sorry, I'll talk to you afterwards. Maybe one more in the back. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are so fundamentally nothing new has happened in terms of storage, right? Storage or memory. There are new platforms which are based on magnetic RAMs, RAMs based on this idea which are called memristors. This is memoristive device, or so just like transistor is a unit of kind of some block of computing. There are new ideas that people think in terms of one is memristor, which can possibly have some consequence on storage. At this point, I don't know something that is radically different that will affect storage. Already, the silicon-based technology of storage is doing a pretty good job. There, you can pack more and more videos on your phone, whether you want it or not. But I don't know of anything revolutionary that's available. So that's my answer. I thank you all for your attention, and I'll be happy to discuss a few questions afterwards. Then I'll have to head home.
It's not a question, but YouTube coverage is required. YouTube coverage is required for these lectures. There are so many.
That I cannot say. I'm just.
People could not come here.
We are actually showing it live on Facebook. Today's lecture.
नॅनो टेक्नॉलॉजीचा वापर आपण पाहत असताना नवीन कम्युनिकेशनच्या साधनाचाही उपयोग इथं आपण करतो. आणि प्रत्येक भाषणं आमच्याकडे व्हिडिओच्या स्वरूपामध्ये उपलब्ध आहेत, यूट्यूबवरती आहेत, आत्ता फेसबुकवरती ज्यांना कोणाला ऐकायचं त्यांनासुद्धा ते दाखवलं जात आहे. फंडामेंटल रिसर्चचा भाग असा आहे की त्याचा उपयोग उद्याला तुम्हाला मिळत नाही. आणि हे सगळे सायंटिस्ट आपण फंडामेंटल इन्स्टिट्यूटमधून बोलवलेले आहेत. त्यामुळे पुढच्या 50 वर्षात ह्याचा उपयोग काय होणार आहे हे फंडामेंटल रिसर्च आहे. रामनने 1930 साली शोध लावला, त्याचे अजूनही नवीन नवीन उपयोग जवळजवळ 80 वर्ष होऊन गेल्यानंतरही मिळत आहेत. हे फंडामेंटल रिसर्च आहे. नॅनो टेक्नॉलॉजीबद्दल आत्ता बोलत असताना नॅनो मेडिसिनमध्ये त्याचा उपयोग तुरळकपणे होऊ लागलेला आहे. आणि आयुर्वेदिक औषधामध्ये होमिओपॅथीच्या पद्धतीने प्रत्यक्ष औषधाचा अंश कमी करत करत त्याचा उपयोग वाढवत नेणं, ह्या बाबतीमध्ये काही औषधं तयार होताना मला दिसत आहेत. काळेसरांनी एक जो प्रश्न विचारला की आकार लहान केल्यानंतर प्रॉपर्टीज बदलतात का. एखादं मेटल ज्या वेळेला आपण गरम करायला लागतो, जसं जसं टेम्परेचर वाढतं तसं त्याच मेटलचा जो प्रकाश आहे किंवा रंग आहे तो बदलत जाताना आपल्याला दिसतो. त्याच्यामध्ये आपल्याला काही थोडंसं दिसेल. परंतु आपण जे ट्रान्झिस्टरचा टॅप हे उदाहरण दिलं हे मला फार महत्त्वाचं वाटतं. आणि ते घरच्यापेक्षाही इंडस्ट्रीमध्ये अधिक उपयोगाचं आहे. 1984 साली जो युनियन कार्बाईड भोपाळचा अपघात झाला, त्याच्यामध्ये व्हाल बंद केली असूनही एका ठिकाणून पाण्याने तो पाईप धुत असताना बंद झालेल्या व्हालमधून दुसरीकडे पाणी गेलं आणि त्यामुळे तो जो लिकेज झालेला आहे किंवा स्फोट झालेला आहे पुढे, तो त्याच्यामधून आहे. कारण कुठलाही व्हाल, मी 30 वर्ष पेट्रोकेमिकल कंपनीत काम केलं आहे आणि माझा अनुभव असा आहे की कुठल्याही व्हालवर विश्वास ठेवता येत नाही. आणि म्हणून त्याला पॉझिटिव्ह आयसोलेशन देऊन मध्ये ब्लाईंड टाकावी लागते, तर एका ठिकाणचं पाणी दुसरीकडे जात नाही किंवा गॅस दुसरीकडे जात नाही. त्यामुळे अशा प्रकारचे अनेक उपयोग हळूहळू आपल्याला माहिती होतील, त्याचा उपयोग होत जाईल. चौथी गोष्ट अशी की अशा प्रकारची भाषणं ही मराठीमध्ये दिली तर तुम्हाला समजणार नाहीत. परंतु मगाशी यांनी जो प्रश्न निर्माण केला की तुमच्या आमच्या करामधून ह्या प्रकारचं जे संशोधन चालू आहे त्याची ओळख आपल्याला होऊच नाही आहे का. इथं जमलेल्या सगळ्यांना आजचं भाषण 5%, 10%, 15% एवढंच समजलेलं आहे. पण तोही प्रयत्न आपण करू नये का हा प्रश्न ह्याच्यामधून उद्भवतो. आणि म्हणून त्याच्यासाठीचा हा प्रयास आहे की ही जी नवीन नवीन शास्त्र ज्याच्यावरती संशोधन चालू आहे आणि आपला देश जगात 10वा आहे म्हणून आत्ता सांगितलं, आणि जे इथून 3 किलोमीटर अंतरावरती आहे ते आपण आणखीन जवळ जर आणलं नाही तर ते 30 किलोमीटर व्हायला वेळ लागणार नाही. आणि म्हणूनसाठी ही अशा प्रकारची भाषणं आपण मुद्दाम या इथं ठेवतो. पण सगळ्यांना एक खुशीची गोष्ट की पुढच्या महिन्याचं भाषण हे मराठीमध्ये होणार आहे. आणि ते 16 फेब्रुवारी 2018ला संध्याकाळी 5 वाजता इथेच होईल. ते आहे तुमच्या हार्ट ट्रान्सप्लांटेशनच्या त्यावरती आहे. आणि डॉक्टर अन्वय मुळे हे जे फोर्टिज हॉस्पिटल मुलुंडला काम करतात आणि ज्यांनी एक स्पेशल कॉरिडॉर तयार करून पुण्याहून मुंबईला 45 मिनिटात हार्ट घेतलं आणि ते बसवून काम सुरू केलं. अशा प्रकारची जवळजवळ 45 ऑपरेशन्स यशस्वीपणे त्याने आत्तापर्यंत केलेले आहेत. अयशस्वी किती आहेत मला माहिती नाही. त्यांचं भाषण आपण पुढच्या महिन्यामध्ये ऐकणार आहोत. नेहमीप्रमाणे ते विनामूल्य असेल. आपण सर्वजण इथं आलात. आज जितका वेळ भाषण झालं त्याच्या निम्मा वेळ आज प्रश्नोत्तरं झालेली. त्याच्यामधून हा विषय तुम्हाला अधिक समजला असेल. आणि मला आनंद आहे की अशा प्रकारच्या विषयामध्ये ज्यांना रस आहे अशी माणसं या ठिकाणी येऊ लागलेली आहेत. ही स्वागतार्ह गोष्ट आहे. आपले धन्यवाद. वक्त्यांचे धन्यवाद. आजचा कार्यक्रम संपला.